All right, so we find ourselves back once again after the deadline, after a lot of teams doing interesting things, some things, nothing, or being like the Utah Jazz and getting a little bit of stuff in return for really nothing. Uh, it's been a season and the tank is going right according to plan. We have had some really, really quality games though along the way. Yes, we've lost some close ones. Yes, we've won some really close ones. And surprisingly enough, Isaiah Collier ended up being the one that was most ready for the spotlight. Granted, he does have a lot of turnovers, but that'll be the topic for a different video. The topic of the video was suggested as, if the Jazz get number one and take Cooper Flag, do you trade for an All-NBA player to take the team to the next level with Lowry and Flag? Now, I genuinely think overall that we could get the number one pick. I would love for us to get the number one pick. Under the hypothetical situation that we do actually end up in that situation, there's going to be a lot of interesting players that are either restricted free agents, or just have the opportunity to have a player option and make something shake. There's not very many players that I would love to see join the Utah Jazz going forward. Now, of course, there's some utility pieces, and if Isaiah Collier does continue to improve, his turnovers go down, then I do think that he just moved Keontae to the bench, which is honestly where I thought that Keontae should have been. I felt like he's the younger and the second coming of Jordan Clarkson for this particular roster. And I'm not mad that the Utah Jazz didn't trade John Collins or Jordan Clarkson at the trade deadline. I'm perfectly fine having them on the team because we can still lose just fine with them here. And everybody seems to have fun, and the rookies are still getting their opportunities here, there, and everywhere in between to showcase what they're capable of doing and put two and two together. Now, Keontae George to me always seemed like more of a six-man candidate than a starting point guard. It felt like that we were forcing him for a significant period of time to make something happen. But even coming into the season, Danny Ainge was outright in saying that they don't know for sure that that's going to be his spot going forward. But after the season, they would like to be able to say for certain where they want to slot him going forward. And I think Isaiah Collier over the past better part of February, even a little bit of late January heading into March, he showcased exactly why their decision has been officially almost made for them. Now, obviously, Keontae George is a miles better three-point shooter. Isaiah Collier still hasn't really taken up to that. But when it comes to sheer playmaking, understanding what he needs to do on the floor and making the right play more often than not as a lead guard, Isaiah Collier has been exactly what you want if you're the Utah Jazz. Now, obviously, there's been opportunities for Lauri Markkanen to sit more games, for him to have more opportunities to just put the ball on the deck and experiment a little bit more with his game, which has led to his shooting percentages dipping. But for me, it's nothing that's going to be substantial enough to say, oh my goodness, he's losing his shooting touch. That's not what it is at all. Now, obviously, adding in a lot of new cogs to the machine will also affect the way that he shoots. And for a lot of these players, it's going to change a lot of the way that they do things on a regular daily basis. But I do believe that overall, this team is moving in a positive direction while still accomplishing the goal of tanking, which is kind of crazy to say because usually when you watch teams lose games, it kind of feels like you're watching the Charlotte Hornets and they're getting, packed up every single game. And me growing up as a Hornets fan, I remember what that felt like. So to see them still in purgatory alongside the Utah Jazz, who seem to be coming out of their rebuild, hopefully, as long as this draft right here ends up going favorably, I don't really want to see another year like this here, as much as I don't hate the brand of basketball that's being played, despite the understanding that obviously the goal is to lose more games than they end up winning by a large margin. Being a bottom 14 basically all but guarantees their odds at having the same share of chances to getting that number one overall pick. Overall, to name some interesting names that are going to have player options, you have LeBron James, you have James Harden, you have Kyrie, you have Chris Middleton, you have Julius Randle, you're going to have Russell Westbrook, and then obviously we'll have the opportunity with John Collins, who I think will probably attempt to stay if he's welcome to, along with Dorian Finney-Smith and Naz Reid. Now, out of that list of players that have options, Naz Reid is expected to decline, and Naz Reid is somebody that's really, really looking good. Obviously, he's going to cost a pretty significant amount of money. I don't think that the Timberwolves will ultimately let him walk, but you can't necessarily rule that out considering what they've done and the fact that they added Julius Randle just to keep themselves under the luxury tax, which is an interesting choice. Julius Randle is okay on the roster. He's not necessarily great. He doesn't mesh well defensively with what they do. Offensively, they found ways to make it work, but defensively and just as a player on the court alongside Rudy Gobert, they don't particularly get along very well, and we've seen that over the duration of the season. You have other guys like Russell Westbrook, who I think has found his permanent home in Denver. Obviously, not too many people are willing to say that, but when he's, I believe at this point, given 110 assists to Jokic, give or take a few. That's the most for any pairing between two players to have assists and scoring. So I believe that it's in the best interest of Russell Westbrook to stay there where he's appreciated and he's going to end up working. Despite there not being a tremendous amount of shooting, he's still been able to be extremely effective and played winning basketball brands on a night-by-night basis. You have, obviously, Chris Middleton, who ended up getting sent to the Washington Wizards, which I did not have on my bingo card ever. I really thought that he was going to end up retiring with the Milwaukee Bucks because I didn't think that he was worth much of anything, but they sent him to purgatory. So go figure. Now, I would like to think that he probably doesn't stay there, but at the same time, he's a lot older up there in his years, and he doesn't necessarily fit the window of opportunity that the Utah Jazz are trying to bring. So I would probably say he's not necessarily on the table for them. Kyrie Irving is going to be one of those interesting guys where, yes, I would love to have him, even though I know he's up there in age. The odds that he comes to Utah, highly unlikely, number one. Number two, I do think that he is going to be one of those players that, regardless, is going to be on the move. I can't see a world where he stays, especially after he just tore his ACL. He just had to watch Luka get traded, and everybody's blindsided by it. And that was his number one. That was his brother. They were locked in. They were even locked in when they played each other the other night, and he dapped him up, and they all shared love and whatnot. So I don't see a world where Kyrie stays in Dallas, but I still don't think that's a very viable option considering our window of opportunity with the Utah Jazz. Now, if everybody was like, oh, Cooper Flagg, immediately when you see him step on the Utah Jazz hardwood, you say, he's an all-star caliber player right now, out the gate, no questions asked, no holds barred, then maybe we scratch our head about that take. Maybe we say, it might be low-key worth it. But if you think there's going to be a growth period, he needs 2-3 years, I don't see the point in making that move. James Harden, another similar piece. He's been reliable with the Clippers, but I think that more likely than not, he's going to stay with the Clippers. I feel like he's comfortable out there. There's no reason to fix something if it's not broken, and I think that he really fits in well with what they do. Steve Ballmer's treated those boys nice, and I just don't see a reason for him to go anywhere. Besides, I don't think he would come to Utah. Similarly with LeBron James, I think that he likes being in LA. I think that having Luka there only increases the reasons why he would like LA, and him finally being able to be an off-ball player more so than being that league creator and that offensive juggernaut that he was required to be over the entirety of his career, even when he had Anthony Davis there. Moving on to some restricted free agents that I think would be interesting. You have Santi Aldama, who has a really strong shooting touch. Do I necessarily love the fit necessarily? Not really. But just from a skill set alone, it just kind of pops into my head. Jonathan Kuminga is going to be a restricted free agent. Obviously, he was in suggested trade talks for Lauri Markkanen. So having him is kind of a nice depth piece. But to me, I like Bryce Sensabaugh. I believe that even though Keontae George is probably going to be relegated to the bench as a sixth man, that kind of messes with Bryce's minutes. And I don't think that Kuminga is going to be the starter for this roster. I think that we do have a strong five ahead of him. Or at least I don't trust him at the guard spots to get the job done the way that we would be necessarily needing to in order to push for the playoffs and make a deep run. Nevertheless, who's to say? And if he was added, would it be like, oh my gosh, get this guy out of here? I don't necessarily think so, but I just personally wouldn't love it. There's also Trey Mann, who is in another world, a more efficient and more intriguing and saucy kind of player of a Keontae George, Jordan Clarkson kind of attributed player. Yes, he's a sixth man. So since we have Keontae George, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to add him unless he was just kind of out there and it was pennies on the dollar. But I don't see a world where the Charlotte Hornets just sit there and up and let him walk. You also have Quentin Grimes, who is an interesting guard, but since we're so guard heavy at the moment, you add Black to the mix, and yes, he's going to be more of a wing tweener. I don't think that you want to add Quentin Grimes. Unrestricted free agents. We have the Brandon Ingrams, we have the Miles Turners, we have the Nickeil Alexander-Walkers, we have Ty Jerome, and we have Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez is the kind of outlandish piece here. He's the old savvy veteran. Yes, we had Drew Eubanks, but I think that for the overall spot minutes, I would love to have an aging Brook Lopez because he has a lot to impart on the game. And he's one of those guys where he started out his career as a really strong post presence. So him being able to kind of coach up Walker Kessler in that regard and maybe even add that shooting touch, because towards the end of his career, after he was a net superstar going over to Milwaukee, he was known as a shooter. He was known as a three-point marksman. Does he do a little bit of the post right here, there, and everywhere in between? Yes. Alongside that lack of shooting that they have there with Giannis as the main attraction for that offense and the fact that they just sent away Chris Middleton, he had to be ultimately that big guy that shoots the basketball a lot to prevent clogging of the lane. So him being able to come in and impart some knowledge onto our bigs, more specifically Walker Kessler, and obviously Kyle Filipowski could benefit significantly as well. I think that that would be a really interesting little caveat right there. Ty Jerome, smaller, not really great defensively, but the shooting prowess and the overall IQ that he sports is something that I've always had a certain level of appreciation for, because it's not necessarily the easiest to find, especially when you have a lot of players that are extremely athleticism reliant or quick step reliant. He's one of those guys that's a little bit more finesse, a little bit more cerebral, because he has to be. And when you're forced to be a certain type of player, not by choice, usually the product is a little bit better than somebody that kind of chose it on a whim or had multitudes of options to pick from. Miles Turner is one of those guys where, yes, he's nice to have, but we've always thought that he was always going to be on the trading block time after time after time, and he never ends up going anywhere. So I think the Pacers are probably going to keep him. And anyways, I prefer Walker Kessler personally between the two of them 1-to-1. So as long as we do keep Walker, which I believe that we should, I know there was some rumors here, there, and in between talking about how teams were like, oh my gosh, Walker Kessler's pretty good. All these rebounds, he's taking a step forward that everybody thought he was going to take last year. This guy's really, really good. Utah, what do y'all guys want from him? No, I don't want to sell Walker Kessler. I don't care if you gave me your first round pick for the next 10 years and you were the Charlotte Hornets. So it was guaranteed to be a top 10 pick. I don't want it. I like Walker Kessler. I like the progressions that he's going through, and I like the intensity that he's finally playing with, and the reasons that make him the most intriguing to me is the fact that, yes, he's a terrific rebounder, but also he gives a tenacious amount of effort now when he's on the glass. It looks personal. It looks like that's my rebound. The ball comes off the rim. Oh, yeah, that's mine. That's mine. It's not ours. It's not an opportunity for me to grab the board. It's my board. And I have a lot of appreciation for that energy that he's giving us this year, because last year it was a little bit lacking. And yes, there were some nagging injuries. And even now this season, there's been a couple of things here, there, and in between tweaking. But overall, it's night and day better. Brandon Ingram is an interesting scoring piece, but if you end up adding Cooper Flag, I don't know that you really want to have Brandon Ingram added to your roster, just because they'll have serious similar minutes. And if Cooper Flag does end up being a really, really good one-of-one caliber type of player, and overall in Duke, it seemed like he's going to get a lot better. And at the beginning of the season, it was a little bit rocky, but he's definitely taken a lot of necessary strides as a league creator. He's also not a shot forcer, which I appreciate. Him understanding that he does have other talented teammates. So hold on, why would I go up on 2 when I know there's a man open? And not only is the man open, but I know he can shoot. Swing, that's a kick out. Making smart reads like that early on is going to benefit him really, really greatly, because there's going to be a lot of guys that want to get after him, want to make a point, want to make sure, hey, the league's not sweet. Yes, you're nice. Yes, you're a pretty solid player. We all respect you in the league as soon as you come in, but I'm going to let you know right now, this isn't college. This is the NBA. This is the top league in the world. There's going to be a lot of players that have that mentality when they see him in a matchup, and they want to end up on the positive end of a highlight reel and not on a negative one where he blows by and dunks on somebody. That's just not something that anybody wants in the league right now, I'm pretty confident to say. So that really leaves Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And he's one of those pieces that I'm really intrigued for, because he plays obviously for the Minnesota Timberwolves alongside Anthony Edwards and those boys, and he is a tenacious defender. I'm a very defensive heavy guy. I love seeing great defense. I love seeing guys that have shooting touch, that can cut to the rim. A lot of guys that are a lot of utility pieces, Swiss Army knives, if you will, but they always play hard. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker is one of those guys. So the idea that he doesn't necessarily fit a particular niche player that we already have at our wing/guard positions is always going to be interesting. And having a multiple defensive aces really, really helps bolster the team's ranks, because we do have shorter guards. Yes, Keontae George is 6'4", but you think of your Jordan Clarksons, you think of your Isaiah Collier, and if he does continue to improve and he ends up being your de facto point guard, then, 6'2" on a good day, he's not necessarily going to be a great guy defensively to have at the point of attack. Having a guy that's known for being good at that sort of thing and also isn't old, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, would do wonders for the team and help push us further forward, and he can still grow and add facets to his game. Yes, he's become a better shooter as the seasons progress, as his career has gone on, and I have reason to believe that he will continue to become a better shooter, because he knows that's going to be what keeps him in the league long term. Because being able to shoot, if you're just a strong defender and you're like Vando over there in LA, yes, there's going to be really, really good minutes for you to play. But if you can't shoot and I can't make you useful offensively, there's also going to be a hard cap on where exactly I can play you and what situations in the game I can actually have you on the court for. I believe that Alexander Walker is going to be a really strong asset, and I don't think that Minnesota is going to let him walk, just like I don't think they're going to let Naz Reid walk. But in the event that they did let either of them walk, I would want them really, really bad. But more so Nickeil Alexander-Walker, because he gives us something that we don't already necessarily have in copious amounts, if that makes sense. But I appreciate you if you made it this far in the video. I know it's been a long time. Work's been killing me. But we're always going to have time to appreciate basketball. I'll be a little bit more consistent this month, so make sure to stay tuned. If you like the video, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, become a member of the channel. I made a new lower tier to help support things. And with that being said, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're in the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.